Now for global business updates, Rotus Oddiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Dr. Batsi. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning to all our viewers out there. Good morning. Good morning.
Last Friday of the year.
Look, I'm so glad that the week is over. It's been, we work hard here. Let us begin with oil prices down slightly early Friday trading. I think it has something to do with the industrial numbers that came out from China. Because whenever you've got data from China that trends downwards, oil traders begin to fear that it's a reduction in demand. Because remember, China is the biggest, consumer of crude and so on. So West Texas, that's North American trade, under $70, Brent crude 73.16. Later on, we're getting the Energy Information Administration crude stockpile information from the US. So that'll tell us how far things are going with the demand. Asia markets, mixed bag today in Asia. Shanghai Composite is surprisingly up despite the downward trend, or maybe it was the World Bank upgrade for China's economy that caused the stocks in China to climb. But Shanghai Composite up, Hang Seng, which was off yesterday for Boxing Day, trading returned pretty thin, but down by 0.13%. The Nikkei 225 in Japan, biggest climber of the Asian markets today, 1.8%. Actually, 40,000 points is cleared. Kospi is still, in fact, I heard they want to impeach the acting president now in Korea. So it's just chaos in South Korea. They want to impeach everybody. We're moving on from there to China now. The World Bank did upgrade China's GDP growth. So for 2024, they're now saying they expect 4.9% from their initial of 4.8% forecast. For 2025, 4.5. 4.1 was the prior forecast, but you can see that they said warning, headwinds remain, the property sector, the deflationary territory, and I think the World Bank and lots of other traders expect that maybe China's stimulus might, help the economy, but others have their doubts. And speaking of doubts, if you look at the industrial numbers that came out now, as far as China's industrial profits, they declined for the fourth straight month. Essentially, looking at the numbers here, this is a gauge on profits from factories, mining companies, and so on and so forth. So I think this is why oil prices fell a bit. So November year-on-year, 7.3%. All the figures are year-on-year. October was 10%, a 10% drop. September was the biggest drop we had seen since the COVID pandemic, 27.1%. And then if you look at January through November, year-on-year, down by 4.7%. So again, prices falling, property sector. I mean, Dr. Bati, Ayo, Rufai, you've all talked about this extensively. These are, the issues that are still coming out with respect to China's economy. We got a quote from an analyst on China's economy. This is Suan Tek-kin. He's the head of research at UOB Group. He said there's no surprise when it comes to the persistently lower industrial profits faced by those companies, especially in China's disinflationary environment. He did, however, sound a note of optimism, suggesting that maybe the things have bottomed out. He said, however, the worst is over for China's economy, given the slate of stimulus push. Again, there seems to be this optimism on the amount of impact the stimulus will have. I think it's basically just bottomed out, and now it's on the way up. I think we move to Japan now. I talked about this yesterday. Japan's cabinet has approved their budget. But keep in mind, this is the cabinet. It still has to get through the parliament. And remember, we covered the elections. The new prime minister, the party has now faced some losses. So they do need the opposition. They need votes from the opposition in order to get this budget through. And we're hearing that the opposition, they actually want some changes to the taxes, how much they get from taxes and so on and so forth. Because remember, they're looking at the record amount of corporate taxes from there. But anyway, at least the cabinet has approved it. We'll see whether it gets through cabinet. They might have to go through some concessions. More data coming out of Japan. No change in the unemployment rates. November was 2.5. The forecast was 2.5. October 2.5% with respect to the jobless rates in Japan. Some countries would give their left and right arm to having unemployment that low. Tokyo inflation. Tokyo, of course, we got the activity coming from Tokyo. It's a gauge as to inflation through the rest of Japan. So headline, this is year-on-year figures, 3%. It did rise. So again, this is what Ueda, and I remember Dr. Abati talking about this yesterday, Ueda's comments about the cautionary outlook in terms of monetary policy. So inflation is rising. So Tokyo headline 3%. October was 2.6. Core inflation, when you strip out volatile food and energy, 2.4% from 2.3. So that's on the up and up. What else are we talking about today? We move on, I think, to the United States. Yeah, so the U.S. returned to trading yesterday after the Christmas holiday. Again, thin volumes, but the Dow Jones, which is up, I think, 1% this week, they climbed, although the S&P and the NASDAQ both fell yesterday. Still, S&P is up about 1.8% this week. NASDAQ up about 2.3%. Remember, Dr. Abati was talking about the Santa Claus rally. That might still, move through to early January, at least the first 2 trading days in January. Then Nigeria is something Ayos talked about quite a lot, the aviation sector. We understand that the Director General of the Civil Aviation Authority is going to be meeting with airline CEOs with respect to the number of delays on flights and cancellations. I think we got the spokesman for the NCAA, Mr. Achimu. Let's take a look at a tweet from him and experiences. And this is Michael Achimugu, excuse me. Spent 20 minutes addressing irate passengers at the Abuja domestic terminal on my way to catch a flight. Had I not been there at the time I arrived, it was potentially going to become violent. It's really something we see here. I had to explain that because the cancellation was due to weather, they were not entitled to accommodation. Took a while, but they calmed down and understood. We must, as a matter of urgency, step up our awareness campaigns, but also hold operators to account where necessary. The days of anyhowness are slowly grinding to a halt. We will do our job. Even my CPOs on duty before I arrived were relieved and thankful for fear of what might happen. We strongly condemn unruly behavior at the airports. And then he followed up with a further set of tweets that the Director General will meet with CEOs. Don't know what's going to come of it, but essentially that is our update for today.
Continue. We need to be able to solve this problem once and for all, or mitigate it, or reduce it to the barest minimum. This cannot continue in a country that really wants to use air transport and other forms of transport as a way to launchpad its economy. I mean, I've been meaning to ask, I don't know what the numbers are like as regards air transport on the GDP, but I'm sure it's very
small,
minuscule.
Very small,
it's not going to do well, and it's because of things like this in the industry and all of that. I mean, yes, with Japan, definitely you'll see the back and forth, as a lot of concessions will be made because...
the budget,
the budget, when you don't have a clear majority, they'll push you back and forth around. But it doesn't stop the fact that Japan has been able to create some level of stability in its market, which is very impressive, at a time like this in the market. While China, obviously, all the 5%, 6% growth, those areas are long gone.
Yeah.
Where the growth is now is in India, and India is working so hard to be able to take over that position. So, but that's a very sizable budget, 732 billion. If only Nigeria had that, what we'll be doing?
We'll be doing a lot.
But corruption too also be a lot.
I know you will bring up corruption, which is valid, very, very valid.
We spoke about the Japan budget yesterday, but of course, I'm sure you know the topic I'm going to talk about this morning.
The airlines.
Airlines. And I read Michael Achimugu's ex-post yesterday when he shared it. And it's sometimes good for them to have a first-hand experience of what Nigerians are facing, because sometimes if you don't see the madness that happens at the airport, you would be removed from the reality of people. I tried to check how much people are paying right now. I think the cheapest to go to Abuja, about 100,000 naira. So to and fro would cost you about 200,000 naira. I keep making the case that if people are paying so much money for a service, then at least make it sensible. Make it worth their while. And so it's great to know that Captain Najomo, who is the DG of NCAA, has called for an emergency meeting, said he had to leave important matters to be able to face this, to give Nigerians a better experience when flying. If you go to the airport when it's rush hour like this, you would think you're in a jungle. Like literally, the people are scrambling. There was a situation where I saw a friend, what happened yesterday, he was flying to Asaba. And the people who were meant to go to, I can't remember, maybe Benin, whose flights had been delayed, blocked the entrance and said nobody was going to move until, they literally went in front of and they had to appeal to them, promise them that they were going to fly them. That's what happens. And so if you're pushing for things like tourism, investment in that sector, you're trying to get more people to fly, people, because of the state of our roads and security, people are choosing the option to fly, then make it palatable. I don't think it's rocket science. Yes, there are weather conditions, but sometimes it's an act of man. There are situations where they say they are waiting for one VVIP and thereby delay an entire flight. So when we start to see penalties for airline operators and we begin to see compensation paid to passengers, maybe we'd have better experiences. So great to see this happen, and hopefully we'll see a saner airline, an airport experience in Nigeria come 2025.
Hopefully.
Okay, China. Now, the big problem in China is the industrial data. That's what you were referring to. The industrial data dropped by 7.3%. Now, that was no surprise. You quoted the gentleman who said it was no surprise. Why is it no surprise? Because China is dealing with disinflation. issues with consumer demand, issues with the property market, and issues, with disinflation generally. Now, it's even what came up in November is even better. In November, it was 10% year on year.
Yep.
In September, the industrial data was 27.1%, the worst industrial data since the year 2020. So what do you have now? That shows that the stimulus measures that China introduced by September, late September, those measures are not working. Yes. So China is still in this disinflationary mode. Now, the next thing about China, however, is that the World Bank is now saying, well, they have raised their assessment of China for 2024 to 4.9%, that the growth rate will be 4.9%. Now, for 2025, I think what they are saying is 4.8% of, 4.8%, lower than the 4.5% that they earlier projected. But the second largest economy in the world is in this disinflationary mode. That is the conclusion in that regard. Yeah. Now, the story from Japan is about Tokyo. Now, Tokyo, the capital of Japan, gives indications about what the inflation rate will be. And what we have been told is that Japan now has inflation rate at 3%.
Yes.
Yesterday, we were saying that Kazuo Ueda, the BOJ president, is saying, okay, they will take a cautious approach. There will be, wage increases in 2024. They will pay attention to global trends and all that. But he also made the point that, look, they will target a sustainable 2% stable inflation rate. Now, what has happened now is that Tokyo, the capital city, has given an indication that the inflation rate is, in fact, above the rate that they expect. So that is that about that. And then you made the point that Japan's cabinet has increased the budget, approved the budget of $732 billion.
Yes.
But the other side of the story is the Japanese yen has strengthened against the dollar, which is an indication that by January, the rate hike that economic experts are predicting is likely to happen. Indeed. So in Japan, you are likely to have that rate hike in January. So these are the, for me, the big stories.
Yes, sir.
If we had more time, I would have talked about BYD in Brazil, and the Brazilian authorities shutting down a factory, in Brazil, saying that they are exploiting people as they do also in Kenya. Although BYD denies it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.